The enemy within. In a stunning moment, that's the mission that President Trump gave to hundreds of our top military leaders. Trump and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth each addressed the military brass, and I can't really remember anything like it. I broke the news last week that Hegseth wanted to do this, call in all these military leaders in order to kind of flex in front of them on camera, and he wanted to talk about restoring the warrior ethos and adherence to strict grooming standards. That turned out to be correct, but then it went further. It seems that Hegseth alone wasn't enough to justify the expense of bringing all of those generals and admirals from around the world, and so President Trump made his own remarks, and they really were unprecedented.
We're under invasion from within. No different than a foreign enemy, but more difficult in many ways because they don't wear uniforms. At least when they're wearing a uniform, you can take them out. These people don't have uniforms. But we are under invasion from within. We're stopping it very quickly. We should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military, National Guard, but military.
He made clear, he sent the clear message that he wants to see more U.S. military troops on the streets of our cities, and all this coming on the eve of a potential government shutdown. Well, there's no one I would rather talk to about this, frankly, than Congressman Jason Crow of Colorado. That's because Congressman Crow is a veteran of the wars in this country. He was an Army Ranger, 82nd Airborne, and he served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and you can sense that sense of honor and discipline that characterizes so much of our military in him. And I also wanted to talk to him about the government shutdown. It's a conversation that I really enjoyed, that I think you will too, and it ends on an optimistic note, which is hard to achieve these days. Before we get to that, however, let me remind you, if you're enjoying what you're seeing, like and subscribe and comment so we can keep this dialogue going. So here is Congressman Jason Crow. Congressman Jason Crow, it's so good to see you today.
Terry, thanks for having me.
Well, you're the perfect person to talk to today, I thought, because of the two big stories. First, Secretary Hegseth and President Trump's speech to the generals and admirals, the leaders of our military, and then the shutdown. Let's start on the military side and your experience serving our country as a ranger in war and now in peace as a member of Congress. I was struck. I just want to know what you made of what we heard from the president and Secretary Hegseth.
Well, Terry, I was disgusted by the scene that unfolded today. Let's just set the scene for folks about what actually did happen, right? So Secretary Hegseth called hundreds of our most senior commanders, or generals and admirals from around the world. These are people that are downrange throughout the entire world, conducting operations, overseeing missions, securing our bases, protecting Americans, working 24/7 in some cases, in many cases. And they called them back with their staff. So spent tens of millions of taxpayer dollars, called them away from missions and operations to sit in a conference room in Quantico, Virginia at a Marine Corps base and listen to Pete Hegseth, a National Guard major and former Fox News host, lecture them on warrior ethos and how to be tough in grooming standards and making sure people don't have beards and can do push-ups and sit-ups. That is a disgusting scene, right? In that crowd are people that I knew and I've served with, right? Former SEAL team commanders, former Delta Force commanders, special forces officers with 10, 12, 14 combat deployments under their belt. And to sit there and to listen to Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth lecture them is truly astonishing.
Well, I want to get at what seemed to have been the point, and Donald Trump, as usual, he summed it up pretty bluntly, and I was struck by what he said. He said that this is going to be a big thing for the people in this room, addressing the leaders of our military, because it's the enemy from within, and we have to handle it before it gets out of control. History is built with military heroes who took on all enemies, foreign and domestic, Trump said. George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Grover Cleveland, George Bush, and others all used the armed forces to keep domestic order and peace. He's saying the quiet part very loudly. He intends to use the military against his opponents inside this country.
That's right. And he listed cities, major U.S. cities. He said that it's tantamount to war. We already know that he has no reservation whatsoever sending federal troops, active duty Marines, National Guard from other states into cities that he believes have aggrieved him in some way, that are Democratic controlled cities. This is very dangerous stuff. Donald Trump is acting like an autocrat. He's acting like somebody who wants to be a dictator. That's the language he's using. Listen, I'm not a hyperbolic and bombastic person. I just don't throw these terms around without really thinking about them and without being serious about those terms. But how can you not say that when you have a president of the United States sitting in front of our generals and our admirals, threatening American cities, saying it's at war, we're at war with certain cities and certain people, and just a week or two ago calling people who he disagrees with, his political opponents, enemies of the state, terrorists. This is very dangerous stuff.
Well, let me ask, based on your experience serving the country in uniform, the oath you took and everybody in that room took when you joined one of the branches of the service to uphold the Constitution. And there has been a culture of the military that it serves without partisanship, obviously. That's been the point anyway. What does this do to the men and women in that room and the men and women under their commands? The President of the United States saying you will be used against the enemy within.
You know, these are men and women, Terry, who have spent 20, 30, in some cases 40 years in uniform in service to America, that have spent time away from their families, countless holidays, innumerable missed family events, combat deployment after combat deployment, that have repeatedly stepped up and done anything and everything this country has asked them to do to protect us. And you have now a 5-time draft dodger and Donald Trump lecturing them on what it means to be tough and saying that we're going to go after the enemy from within. I can tell you what was probably going through the minds of those men and women was that this is also appalling and does not represent the integrity, the sense of duty, the sense of service that I have spent my life embodying and trying to portray for my troops. But what I'm more concerned about is the corrosive effect downstream that it sends to our junior soldiers and sailors and Marines and airmen whose careers and leadership style is being shaped right now, who are in the formative stages of becoming those servant leaders that we need them to be 20 or 30 years from now, to be our future commanders. I'm very concerned about that corrosive effect in an environment that allows the very hard line between politics and service in our military, allows that line to be blurred, which Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump have repeatedly done. And I'll say this: I have been to many places in the world where we don't have civilian control of the military, where there are countries where that line has either been blurred or completely demolished, and the military rules and politics is inserted into the military. That is not where we want to go. It is an awful system. It creates terrible results. It's not who we are as a country.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you talked about the younger officer corps and younger soldiers coming up in this climate. Donald Trump's going to be president for another 3 years, most likely. He seems to want more from time to time. But at any rate, he's certainly got a hold of the institution right now. Is there anything that can be done to check this drift, this directed drift? It's not really a drift towards the kind of military that we haven't had before, one that serves against domestic enemies of the president, as he describes them and defines them, and one also that really must respond in the way that the defense secretary and the president are talking about.
Well, the biggest thing we can do right now is not vote for a budget that's going to allow political purges of our military, that's going to allow the witch hunts that Pete Hegseth is doing throughout the entire Department of Defense and our ranks, to target people who have political beliefs that are different from them, that are not going to allow the many, many abuses that we see this administration pursuing. I'm not going to vote for it. I'm not going to support it. The second thing we can do is, as members of Congress, conduct oversight and bring to light these abuses and tell that story to the American people who when they see these things and hear these things, are also astonished. Right? Americans, I know we've been living with Donald Trump for a long time, but Americans across the country, I'm traveling around the country doing my recruiting job, recruiting this next generation of candidates to retake the House in the midterms. And what I can tell you is in urban areas and rural areas and red areas and blue areas, people are astonished by this. They really are. Like, it hasn't become normalized yet. And that is our important task, is not allow it to be considered normal. And I can tell you that it's not. People are really upset about this stuff. They're appalled by what's happening, because you contrast all of this, right? Donald Trump goes and talks to these commanders and lectures them on service. And then he goes back to the White House, where he's in the process of building a new $200 million gilded ballroom. And he just tore up the Rose Garden to create a Rose Garden club for his wealthy and elite donors, right? Like, the contrast couldn't be more stark.
And it does represent a new chapter of Trumpism, as does this kind of address to the military. You mentioned something I'd like to pick up on, and that's the purge, a political purge going on in the officer corps. I have a couple of friends in the military out here who came up to me independently and said that's what's going on. The promotions are being very strictly monitored and awarded on the basis of loyalty, political loyalty to the president.
Yeah, that's right. And we saw earlier in the year the firing of the top JAG officers. These are the judge advocate generals, the military lawyers, which was very chilling to me. That kind of passed through a lot of people's consciousness and didn't get a lot of attention. But that was one of the more chilling things that happened, because these military lawyers are the advisors to all of the commanders in the military that advise our commanders on what is lawful and what is not lawful, what is constitutional, what is not constitutional, and what orders are compliant with the law, right? And they fired a lot of these senior commanders and replaced them with loyalists. Now, why would they do that, you would ask, right? It seems pretty clear they want people who are more loyal to Donald Trump than actually applying the law and the Constitution to our military units and advising our commanders accordingly. So there has been this long time plan to try to replace, again, incredible leaders, people that are doing incredible things all the time to keep America safe, with instead people who will be loyal to Donald Trump. And regardless of merit, right? Merit is not, incompetency is not the test with this administration, right? Like, it doesn't matter whether you know the job or not. There are countless examples of that in every agency. 23, 24-year-old kids right out of college that are like leading major agencies and departments, right? It's not about competency and whether or not you could do the job. It's about loyalty, and that makes everybody substantially less safe.
Because any independent judgment, any independent source of power is a threat. And I do wonder about, let me ask, from the perspective of Secretary Hegseth, who talked about the problems in the military. I'd like your sense of that. He talked about a woke military, that the military has been deformed by equity aims to try to promote people on the basis of things other than pure merit in the military. And he talked in particular about trans issues and women in the military. Do you think the military has been weakened by the efforts over the past generation and more, really, to make it more representative of the American people?
Pete Hegseth seems to be caught in an era of 50 plus years ago, right? Like, they want to fight our past wars, number one. Number two, I would love for Pete Hegseth to stand in front of the paratroopers and the Rangers that I fought with and say that they're weak and woke, right? And let's get their response, right? The men that I served with, who are some of the toughest, hardest Rangers and paratroopers you could imagine, who did countless deployments and combat operations. I don't think they're weak and woke. In fact, I know they're not. Right. So listen, this is just all BS. Right. That this is them trying to concoct a problem to achieve a different end. right? They're trying to manufacture this culture war so that they can then use it as an excuse to purge the ranks, get rid of people they don't like, who aren't loyal, put in people who will be loyal and unquestioning, and reshape all of our institutions to serve Donald Trump and not the United States of America. That's what they're trying to do, right? But I can guarantee you, we are tough. The men and women of this military do incredible things every day. I honor that service and will continue to. And warfare is changing too, changing really fast. You want to see the future of warfare, and it's here now. It's in Ukraine. That's what the future of warfare looks like, right? And yeah, well, we need people who can do 20 pull-ups and 100 push-ups. Yeah, we will always need some people that can do that. But do you know what we really need a lot more of? Drone operators and satellite technicians and cyber technicians and cryptologists, right? That is the future of warfare. And those are the people that we need. And they may not meet Pete Hegseth's definition of somebody that can go out and do, 50 pull-ups in 10 minutes. I would much rather them be able to fly a drone really well in a combat situation.
So there's a security risk to all this. And by the way, Hegseth had some trouble at the end of those pull-ups that he was doing.
Yeah. Well, we can get into the fact that his pull-ups actually also suck, and that it's all it's all for show.
Let me turn to the shutdown for a moment. Is it going to happen? We're going to have a shutdown government?
Yeah, it looks like it is going to happen because the Republicans have shut it down already, right? We're not even in session right now. We were ready to go into session, to show up, to negotiate, to vote, to create a solution to this, find a solution to this. And they literally canceled votes this week. They canceled it. They shut down Congress already. Speaker Johnson did, right? And then you have Donald Trump trolling Hakeem Jeffries, posting disgusting AI-generated posts, acting like a middle schooler and not a president of the United States. So there's no discussion. They've completely shut the door to us. We remain ready and willing to negotiate a bipartisan result to this, which is the only way we ever pass funding bills and keep the government open, but they've closed the door.
Well, that was weird, by the way, that whole AI, Jeffries in a sombrero. I'm not quite sure what he's getting at there, but strange. But it's really serious. Most shutdowns, they're not haggling, but real meaningful debates over this kind of spending or that kind of spending. It seems to me that right now the real question for the country should be one about power. If, in fact, President Trump is declaring that he has the power simply to cut funds that you guys negotiate, that you guys vote for, that you listen to your constituents as members of Article 1 and put into a budget, and then Trump says, well, thanks for your votes, but I'm just going to take all that money away because I don't want to spend it, then that's about power, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about power, but, it's less, actually, there's no doubt that, respecting Congress and respecting the power of the purse and congressional appropriations, to get wonky here for a minute, and oversight, that's really important. But what this is really about is the fact that healthcare costs for most Americans are about to skyrocket soon, right? To the point where they're not even going to be able to afford their prescription drugs and not even going to be able to afford their healthcare premiums. Right? And millions of people are going to go without. And that is life and death for folks. That's really what this is about. Right? And I'm not going to, they say, well, why don't we do a continuing resolution and just kick the can down the road for a couple of months? No. Why would we do that if people are going to lose their health care coverage in the meantime, right? And are sick now and need doctors now and need coverage now? On top of the fact that Donald Trump is not operating in good faith and continues to disregard Congress, continues to dismantle essential government services, continues to do political purges of our military and our agencies, continues to send federal troops into cities that he just doesn't like. I'm not going to vote for any of that because I have an obligation to help protect my constituents and make sure that they can go to doctors and keep their families healthy.
Well, I want to ask, and finally we're kind of running out of time here, but I want to ask, do you as a member of Congress, when you hear from your constituents, do you hear a note among those who support you and maybe even some who don't, of bewilderment, almost disheartened feelings, because Donald Trump is riding high. Nothing seems to be able to stop him. And the parade of horribles that you just outlined there is likely to come to pass. What do you say to people who are disheartened by all this?
Well, I share a lot of the disillusion and disheartenment, actually, right? Like, that's one of the reasons I ran for Congress, is because the system is broken and has been for a very long time. It's not delivering the results that it should. The major reform on everything from healthcare to infrastructure to housing costs to gun violence prevention, most of those things are legislatively broken, and big things are not being done on them. So I decided, instead of complaining about it, to actually run for office and try to do something about it, right? So I get that. I'm never going to say you shouldn't be disillusioned, you shouldn't be disheartened, right? Because I am too, which is why I ran for office. The question is, how do you respond to that? If you don't think the system is working, and if it's broken and not delivering for you and your family, then you can either check out and not engage and just hope that it fixes itself, or allow somebody else to fix it. And I can almost guarantee you that you're not going to like the result, and you're not going to like how they choose to fix it, because they're going to stack the deck in their favor and not in yours. Or you can roll up the sleeves and join the effort to retake our country and democracy back, and to run for office and to support candidates and to get loud and to be heard, right? And because that's the way ultimately we're going to fix this. So yeah, you're never going to find me defending a broken system or saying you shouldn't feel bad about this, but you are going to find me saying you have a choice about how you respond to that. You have agency in this process, because that's ultimately what a democracy is about.
That's it, isn't it? If, in fact, we're living through an authoritarian power grab, which there's a lot of evidence that we are, it's only people power that's going to stop it.
Yeah, I always say, democracies are not, they're not really about departments or agencies or institutions. In the history of America, it's never been, some department, some piece of paper, some norm or tradition that's saved us and has prevented major abuses or our democracy for going off the rails. It's people. It's always been people that have stepped up and said, not on my watch, right? And guess what? Those people are usually not the wealthiest, most elite, and the most privileged who we are seeing bowing and cowing and giving in to this administration. Media conglomerates, large law firms, big CEOs, we're seeing the capitulation of those with seemingly the most power at the same time as we're seeing those who are regular, everyday Americans with the most to lose and the most vulnerable stepping up and standing in the breach right now. So the story always is about regular folks who have decided that they're not going to allow this to happen on their watch, and that the time is now. So I'm jumping in. I've jumped in. I am all in on this project. Right, I took an oath when I was a teenager, that it was a lifetime oath. I will give everything to this nation, and I'm asking everyone to jump into.
Yeah, I'm taking that as an optimistic end to our conversation. It felt good.
There is cause for optimism, because I see every day who Americans really are, the heart and soul of Americans in this country, and we are not without fault. We're not without mistakes, and we're not without, some of our worst impulses from time to time. But, Americans are fundamentally good people, and inspire me all the time. And that's what gives me a lot of hope.
Absolutely. I say the best kept secret in American life is that most people are still normal. They're still Americans. They aren't radicals that want to change the country radically. They want a better life. And
more than most, like the vast majority. I mean, you don't really, if you watch your social media, thanks to the algorithms and thanks to the cable news, you may not get that impression. You're like, wow, everybody's crazy. But I can confirm that is not true. Like the vast majority are actually just normal people trying to do good things and raise families and build their communities.
Exactly. Well, thank you for that dose of sanity, Congressman. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Terry.